November 7th, 1943. November 8th, Roy R. Clem, 91st Bomb Group. November 7th, 1943. LeRoy Maines Sullivan, 56th Squadron, Royal Air Force. November 7th, 1943.
And by the way, that microphone doesn't work at all. It doesn't work for the camera. That's why.
I apologize for this, but it's for the camera, it's not for me. Lucky, it's a pleasure to see you, as well as our other 8th Air Force veterans. Thank you for being here in the Chapel of Fallen Eagles. How we got here, and I'll be very brief. In 2020, when we first established the Flags for the Fallen Memorial, Lucky came out from Dallas with Governor Rick Perry. And we had an evening with Lucky, several of us who were on the committee at the time. And Lucky shared a very powerful story of friendship and love that he had for a friend of his that he grew up with in Chattanooga. And it's the first time any of us heard this powerful story. And that gentleman's name was LeRoy Maines Sullivan, commonly known referred to as Sully. So when we heard this story, we were so blown away that the strength of friendship. Lucky shared a picture of Sully that he had in his phone, and it touched several of us. And we said, we have to do something for this American hero that ended up flying for the Royal Canadian Air Force, and unfortunately was killed in action while serving for the Royal Canadian Air Force in England, and his body was never returned to the States. So it really impacted Sully's family, it impacted Lucky, it impacted Sully's mother, and it was a really, really sad story, to tell you the truth. So we said, several of us got together and said, we need to put something in our memorial garden to remember that American hero from Chattanooga, Tennessee, Lucky's best friend, Sully. So several of us got together and brainstormed. In 2021, we came up with the idea of a plaque and putting it in a part of our garden that's dedicated to the Freckleton air disaster and transferring that into almost a Royal Canadian, British Air Force, RAF, British citizens memorial, because they helped the 8th Air Force on to victory. They were there with the locals, they were there flying for RAF Bomber Command, they were there flying for RAF Fighter Command, and they were supporting our boys in England. So in 2022, we had the opportunity to unveil that plaque to Lucky here in the chapel. And Lucky, if you recall that day, was very emotional for a lot of us. And he was very proud of that plaque, and we were too. But then we realized, God, we got to find a way to mount this now. So not being in the plaque and memorial business, we had to search out a granite slab that we thought would be appropriate. And that took a whole other year of finding the slab, running around half of Georgia to really make this work for us. And then last year, Lucky got to come out, and we had to do a lot of remedial work in the Freckleton Memorial, which has changed significantly. Lucky, since you were last here, we had to remove shrubbery, remove overgrown trees, rework the soil, and it's still basically a work in progress. But Lucky never got to see the plaque on the granite memorial. It was on the back of a trailer here last year. Things don't move as fast as we often like here. But longer story short, we got the granite in, we got the plaque mounted, we got the granite in, and it's ready to be dedicated by Lucky. And Lucky, we're thankful that when we started this process at 98, you're here at 102 to be able to dedicate this plaque to your best friend. And I'd like to apologize on behalf of Brent and our committee that has taken so long. But it's truly a remarkable story. It's featured in Lucky's great book that was written by Kevin Maurer, Damn Lucky. If you don't know the story, please go get the book, borrow it from the library, and just listen to that story, that powerful friendship that unfortunately wars sometimes bring together. But that's a friendship that's lasted Lucky's whole lifetime. My wife and I and several of us got to travel to Europe last October. And I will tell you, I got the benefit of going with Lucky to Brookwood Cemetery, where Sully is buried. And to go there and to find Lucky's grave with his daughter Lainey and son-in-law Rick, and to see the love that this gentleman has for his fallen hero, fallen friend, Sully Sullivan. So it's a remarkable thing. We're going to go out here. There's several things. Brent's going to explain it to everybody. But I just want to say thank you, Lucky, for sharing that story. And there's a piece of Tennessee that'll always be in our memorial gardens for your dear friend Sully. Thank you very much.
When we take you out there to the memorial, I want to go ahead and read to you what it says on in here, the comfort of air conditioning while we're sitting down. And this is what the plaque says in front of the memorial. It says, "My best friend Sully, in lasting tribute, Flight Lieutenant LeRoy Means Sullivan, an American airman who heroically served in the Royal Canadian Air Force in World War II, 56 RAF Squadron. Born 20th December 1921, Chattanooga, Tennessee. Killed in service on 7 November 1943 while piloting an RAF Hawker Typhoon at RAF Station Martlesham, Heath, Suffolk, England. Final resting place, Brookwood Military Cemetery, Surrey, United Kingdom." With this quote, "If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever Tennessee. Always loved, forever missed, never forgotten, dedicated by my best friend, Major John Lucky Luckadoo, B-17 pilot, 8th Air Force, 100th Bomber Group." Please, round of applause. We got some things that we want. Oh, you know what? One thing I haven't done, I'm always messing this stuff up, is I haven't recognized Lucky's family. We have his niece up here helping us today, and Lucky's family, please stand up over here. And Lucky's friend, Bunker, stand up, please. Thank you, I appreciate that. All right, with this, as this team that John's talking about got together and further wanted to personalize this monument, because Sully is interned overseas, has never returned home, it was thought we need to bring home to this monument. So there's some items that we're going to place in a capsule, and it'll be buried beneath the monument. It's not a time capsule, we're not going to dig it up. But we are going to place a writing, and I'll read that later on to explain what the items are. And I've asked certain individuals, there are individuals that make Flags for Fallen this weekend happen. And I said, I'd really like you guys to really make this event happen, to bring the items up, as I read about the items, and then hand them to Lucky here. Lucky can give them to his niece, and they can place them in the capsule. So I really do appreciate my team. A lot of people give me a lot of credit for Flags for Fallen, and all I do is talk on the camera when the TV crew shows up. It's these guys that do all the work. The first one, though, the first item is soil from his home. Sean O'Donnell is going to be bringing that up. This is soil from the home of Sully. On this ground, Sully was loved by his mom. He played, he grew into a young man, and met his friend Lucky. Yeah, you can place it. Go. Thank you, Josh. The next is John Brandon. He is going to bring a stone from Lookout Mountain. In the shadow of this mountain, Sully developed a character of honor, a moral code of selfless service. George Schumann is going to bring soil from Sully's mother's grave. This soil represents the closeness of a mother's bond and love for her child. In this case, her only child and her only son. Ken Maxwell is going to bring a stone from Missionary Ridge. This represents the Battle of Missionary Ridge, or it's also known as the Battle of Chattanooga. The fact that Sully and Lucky's friendship grew in the shadow of a great Civil War battle is probably foreshadowing that war would one day separate these friends. Jeff Johnson is going to bring a piece of the runway where Sully's typhoon left the earth for the last time that fateful day, reminding us to cherish life today as none of us are promised tomorrow. And finally, John O'Neill is bringing 2 small bottles of Johnny Walker. Black, not red. It's gonna be black. 1 bottle is for Lucky to keep, and 1 bottle will go into the capsule to commemorate the fellowship and friendship over drink. With that, Lucky, I'm going to let you have the floor. I want to say a few words.
Thank you all for being here and sharing this very, very meaningful moment with me. I don't know whether you realize it or not, but in wartime, in the air war, when we lose a crew, there is no memorial, there is no funeral. They're just gone. You just have empty bunks where they were. That's why this particular situation that I found myself in is so meaningful to me. And that is because my very best friend in life, my early childhood, was this young man, Sullivan. When we graduated from high school in 1940, we knew that we were going to be eligible for service to our country if and when it became involved in the war. At that time, President Roosevelt was being severely pressured by the British, particularly Prime Minister Winston Churchill, to join the Brits in defending their country against the onslaught of the Third Reich, which was about to invade England. Unfortunately, President Roosevelt knew that he did not have the support of the American public to do so. So he could not do it. He did, however, support the Brits in every other way, financially, with war materiel, and with moral support. And then, of course, at that point, realizing as 18 and 19-year-olds that we were apt to be involved, we decided the best thing that we could do would be to go to Canada and join the Royal Canadian Air Force and get our training and get our wings and commission. And thus, once America did become involved in the war, but we could transfer to the Army Air Corps, as it was then known. And we'd be a step or two ahead of our buddies. We thought that was pretty smart. Unfortunately, when we received the application forms from the Canadian Air Force, because we were underage, they required parental consent. Sully had been born unknown to his father, who was a World War I veteran and had died a very miserable death as a consequence of being mustard gassed in World War I. And Sully never knew it. He was all his mother had. And when we presented our plan to go to Canada and join the Air Force, she thought about it very, very carefully, as a mother would. And she looked at him and said, Sully, if you honestly believe that you must do this, you have my blessing. Well, I naturally thought that I could return to my home, and I've got a similar reaction from my parents. And when I presented the plan to my mother, she was overwhelmed that Mrs. Sullivan, with her only offspring, had agreed to let her son go to Canada and fly for the king. So my mother said, well, if Mrs. Sullivan is willing to do that, then I'm not going to stand in her way. But you have to convince your father. Well, when my dad came home, he heard about the plan and he said, you blithering idiots don't have any idea what you're doing. Over my dead body would I give you my consent. And he told me to get back to school. And that's how Sully came to go to Canada and trained on Spitfires and went all through the North African campaign, chasing Rommel, survived, and ended up being posted back in England. Meanwhile, Pearl Harbor occurred, and then there was no question about my cert. And I didn't need parental consent. So I joined the aviation cadets and was trained in this country as a bomber pilot, as a multi-engine pilot, and graduated in February of 1943 as a newly minted shavetail, as we call them, second lieutenant. And they took 40 of us from my class and me, and unlike any other group in the 8th Air Force, sent us directly to Kearney, Nebraska to join the Bloody 100th, as it became known. It was only known as the 100th Bomb Group then, which was a B-17 outfit. Had already been through pre-combat training. None of us from my class had ever been in the B-17. And what did they do? They pulled out all of the co-pilots, the second in command of each crew of 10 men, and put us in the right-hand seat. Issued us new airplanes with extended fuel tanks and sent us to war. So from my side, I went into the conflict totally unprepared, untrained, and unsuspecting. We were terribly young. We were in our 19, 20, 21 year olds. and we didn't have a clue what we were doing. We just knew that the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, was the most formidable Air Force in the world at the time. They knew what they were doing. They had been fighting for 4 years against the Russians on the Eastern Front, the British on the Western, and they really knew what they were about. And here we were, innocent guinea pigs, going up against a well battle-tested outfit who was intent on capturing the world. They had already captured all of Europe. All of Europe was completely occupied by the Third Reich when we got to war. And unbeknownst to us airmen, the Brits were diametrically opposed to our daylight bombing strategy. There was a raging debate going on behind the scenes that we didn't have any clue about. We're not privy to knowing about. Where the Brits said, we have tried daylight bombing and we do not believe it is the best and most efficient way to utilize the Air Force to bring Hitler to his knees. But our commanders thought otherwise. And they were determined to prove their strategy of daylight, high altitude bombing with the Norden bomb site, which was supposed to be our secret weapon, and unpressurized heavy aircraft, and that we could survive. And I suppose in retrospect, the major mistake that Hitler made was to miscalculate the fact that we could replace our losses. Because losses we did sustain, heavy losses. And that was one of the reasons why the 100 Bomb Group, which those of you who may have seen the docuseries that has recently been produced and released by Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg called Masters of the Air, is about the 100th Bomb Group, the only group in the 8th Air Force that has been so memorialized. And so, this is a special moment for me to realize that my friend Sully, God rest his soul in peace, and as John O'Neill has told you, we have visited his gravesite. He was not returned to his body was not repatriated to this country. When I learned of his demise, he had been transitioned to a vicious aircraft called the Hawker Typhoon that the British had developed that had such a powerful engine that as it took off down the runway, the torque of the propeller would drive it off, and they had to keep full opposite rudder in order to keep it straight. He had been to my base and visited me, and I'd taken him up in a B-17, and he said, "You've got to come and visit me in my base." And I wasn't able to do that because I was then an operations officer, and I was very, very busy and focused on pursuing my duties on the ground as well as still flying combat. And about a month later, I did get some free time on an airplane, and I flew down to his base, which was about 40 miles south of mine at Thorpe Adams. And as I landed, I squeezed this B-17 into a fighter field. The runways on a fighter field, in case you don't know it, are only half as long as a bomber field. And so I was standing on the brakes to keep from running off the end. I looked over the side, and here was a smoking wreckage, still smoldering. And I didn't think too much about it because I was so concerned with not running off the runway. I taxied up and asked to be shown to Sully's quarters. I just wanted to say hi if I had to get back to my base. And the officer of the day who met me said, "Sir, you have to see the commander." Well, of course, it is protocol that when you land at a foreign base, you do report to the commanding officer and tell him why you're there and what your needs are. And I said, well, I know that's the protocol, but I'm really in a bit of a hurry, and could I just see his quarters? He said, no, you've got to see the wing commander. When I was shown into his office, he looked up and he said, "Yank, what the hell are you doing here? Are you lost? Are you out of fuel? Petrol?" And I said, "No, sir, I'm just on a social call to see my best friend, Lieutenant Sullivan." He said, "You knew him?" And I said, "Sir, he was my best friend. We were fraternity brothers together. We grew up together." He said, "Did you see the wreckage as you landed?" I said, "Sir, you don't mean that was Sully?" He said, "Unfortunately, we lost him yesterday afternoon. On takeoff, he just got in the air and with full opposite rudder, his engine quit and he dove in and never knew what hit him." He said, "I'm just writing his mother and I want you to do it." I said, "Sir, with all due respect, he was fighting for the British. He was not even in the 8th Air Force or the Army Air Corps, and I have no jurisdiction. So he was serving under your command. I believe that's your responsibility." He said, "I know and I will write her, but knowing that you were his best friend, I think she would best get the news from you." And so I had to sit down and cable her that her only child had perished so that we would enjoy the freedoms that we do today. When I returned from the States and for finishing my tour and called upon Mrs. Sullivan, she said, "I want you to return his remains to this country because he's buried among strangers." And I said, "Miss Sullivan, this is wartime. I'm very sorry, but there's nothing I can do about it." And she said, "You were his best friend." She never spoke to me again. So I think you have some idea now of what a meaningful moment this is, because losing a friend, and I went back to his funeral, which was with full military honors there on his base. The author of my book did his research. He actually found a picture of me at that funeral, receiving the salute from the commanding officer as Sully was buried. It's so moving and touching that you have seen fit to commemorate the memory of my dear friend Sully. him that he serves with pride and distinction, and is one of the more than 26,000 members of the 8th Air Force that didn't come home. Thank you all. God bless America.
Thank you, Sully. Thank you so much.
Billy E. Clapper, 95th Bomb Group, September 15th, 1943. Marvin E. Clark Jr., 398.
Cases may be in a flag for the Canadian Royal Air Force. You'll see Sully's monument is facing south, north, northwest towards Chattanooga.
Next one. Okay.